You're about to learn the top 7 pickleball hacks that will immediately improve your game.
We're gonna cover every cheat code in the book, so go ahead and subscribe and let's get into number 1.
For number 1, we've got one of the most famous and probably most fun pickleball hack to start us off. It's called the Kyle, and that was named after Kyle Yates, who popularized it in pro matches. This shot mixes in deception to your game, which can give you free points when you use it correctly. So let's first show you how to do it. So first, I'll demonstrate what a Kyle looks like. It's when you're going to hit a backhand dink, and at the last second, you flip your paddle over and hit it straight on. So when you do this motion, most people are tracking your paddle face and expect the ball to go where the face is facing, because that's where you should be aiming. But with a Kyle, at the last second, you're going to change your face's direction by turning the paddle over to the other side. And that's going to send the ball now forward rather than cross court for what it looks like it's going to do. So to do that, it's actually pretty simple. All you gotta do is at the last second, like we said, put weight on your left foot and then tilt your wrist over and hit the ball inside out. This might take a couple takes to get comfortable with, but once you've got it mastered, it'll come pretty naturally. So we go for the ball, we hit it, but we turn our paddle over at the last second. The key here, because it's all about deception, is we have to sell the backhand dink. So prepare really early when you're about to hit a Kyle. We want your opponent to think you're about to backhand dink, so as soon as that ball starts crossing the net, you should already be looking like you're about to hit the ball cross court with a backhand dink. So another important part is to make sure you sell the ball with your eyes. So start out with that same preparation, looking cross court like you're about to hit a backhand dink, but once you're ready to make contact, eye down the ball, and then that's after you're looking down when you want to aim at your destination. If you're looking downward, they're not going to know where the ball is going to go, and that's when you can hit it straight at them and catch them off guard. And the final note is to wait until the last second to actually flip your paddle over. If you do it too early, your opponent will see the new direction that the ball is about to go, and that pretty much ruins the shot. There's a couple great scenarios to use a Kyle. The first and most obvious one is to catch a sleeping player and eventually hit the ball either at their chest or right past them. The best time to do this is during a dink rally when you're consistently hitting backhands and you're noticing that the player in front of you is starting to fall asleep or not pay attention. That's the best time to eventually turn that backhand over and send the ball flying right their direction. The only note I'm gonna put here is don't hit the ball too hard. It's pretty easy to overhit a Kyle and just make an out ball, and that's the last thing you wanna do. So take a little bit of power off. The point is deception, not power in this scenario. Another great time to use a Kyle is when there's an open middle. So in that same scenario where we're in a super long dink rally cross court, if you happen to push your opponent out wide, that's a great time to mix in a Kyle and now hit the new open court of space that was left open. This scenario occurs the most when both players are forced to cover their line. So when a ball is pushed out wide for you, the player in front of you is now forced to cover their line. But when you show a backhand, the player across from you is also going to stay cross court because they're anticipating a ball coming cross court and they're going to cover their line. That leaves an open middle that you can exploit with a Kyle. The final situation I like to use Kyles is less fancy in trying to win the point and just to mix in during a rally. So the great thing about mastering the Kyle is you'll start to learn to master wrist movement. That allows you to change the ball's direction even mid-rally. So instead of having to hit cross court with every shot, I can choose to replicate that same motion, but go down the line. And it doesn't have to be a winner. My point is just to be able to mix up the shots and make my opponent move throughout the rally.
Speaking of the wrist, that brings us to our next big hack. Use your wrist more in every part of your game. Using your wrist can have several advantages, so let's break down how and where to do it. The first place you can use your wrist for an advantage is during the serve. So very often when people are serving, they'll keep their wrist completely locked. And when you hit like this, you're mainly relying on your arms and sometimes your legs if you're using them well to generate power on your serve. But if you use your wrist, you can generate what we call paddle head speed, and this allows you to hit balls way harder. So during your serve, specifically on your backswing, you want your paddle head to go behind you and your wrist sort of bends. Whenever your wrist bends, this lets your paddle lag behind you. So now whenever I come forward, my paddle head is lagging behind and I can flick my wrist forward, and now the tip of my paddle moves incredibly fast, and whenever I make contact with the ball, this is moving so fast that I'm able to generate a lot more power this way. The one thing you need to be careful of here is that your paddle face stays pointing in the right direction. So when you start to use your wrist to snap and get more power on the ball, your paddle face might change direction if you don't do it in a very controlled way. So just make sure that when you're flicking your wrist, you're flicking it going straight forward so that the ball goes where your paddle's facing. The next place to use your wrist in your pickleball game is on your overheads. So to get more power on your overheads, just like in our serve, we want to be snapping our wrist at the point of contact. So in your overheads, cock your wrist back, and then whenever you come forward, you can snap your wrist forward. And first of all, this gives you a lot of power, but the second thing it opens up is a variety of new angles. So just like on our serve, the ball goes where our paddle is facing. So when I'm making contact, I can flick my wrist in a variety of different directions to manipulate where that ball goes and open up more angles. Using your wrist on your overheads is inherently more risky, so you want to make sure you're giving yourself margin. So if you want to go for a sharp angle, then just go for the sharp angle, but it's usually not a good idea to go for a sharp angle that's also really deep in the court, because now you open up two possibilities for variability, and you're probably going to hit the ball out more often than not. So if you're going to hit the ball deep, hit the ball deep. If you're going to hit the ball at an angle, then hit the ball at an angle, but you usually don't want to do both of those things, because when you're using your wrist, you add more variability to your shot. The next place you want to use your wrist is in your roll shots. Now this is more of an advanced technique, but if we want to take a ball out of the air when we're standing at the kitchen line, we have to hit in a low to high motion. And we do this so that we can apply topspin on the ball. And when we apply topspin on the ball, that allows the ball to go up and over the net, but then back down before it gets to our opponents. This is called a roll shot because the ball typically rolls off your paddle. When you're first beginning to try this shot out, you don't want to use too much wrist. You want to keep your wrist locked and just use that low to high motion. This is a lot more of a stable shot and will be way more consistent. But as you progress, you'll start to have more control over your wrist. And additionally, paddles have a lot of grit on them, so we can generate a ton of topspin if we add just a little bit of wrist into our roll motion. So to do this, the main thing is to have your paddle tip down at the point of contact, and then as you're making contact, keep a loose wrist and brush up the backside of the ball by slightly rotating your wrist upwards. This motion will generally get you more spin, but what you want to avoid is turning your wrist in either direction as you make contact with the ball, because once again, that will force the ball to go wide in a direction that you did not mean for it to go. The final place that you want to start incorporating your wrist is in dink rallies when you're looking to speed up the ball. Now, traditionally in dink rallies, you want to keep your wrist locked because, as we talked about so many times, the ball goes where the paddle face is pointing. But occasionally we want to speed up this ball and hit it with a bit more pace. To do this, you want to make everything look like you're about to hit a dink. And because you're making everything look like you're about to dink, your opponent is going to expect a dink. And that's when you can use your wrist to add some pace to the ball and speed it up. And by doing this, you're making your speed ups look way more deceptive, and that will usually cause your opponent to pop the ball up, which you can then put away. And then finally, the most advanced tip here is in your dink rallies, you can use some wrist. So at the very top level, Ben Johns does this all the time. He'll show one paddle face angle, and then right before he makes contact, he uses his wrist to shape the ball in a direction that you probably aren't expecting. And so by utilizing your wrist in dink rallies, you can generate a lot of really cool angles that otherwise you would not be able to do.
Up next, if you're not using hand signals, you're missing out on one of the best ways to communicate with your partner during a pickleball rally. We use hand signals on returns, and the person not returning is going to be the one giving them out. So let's break them down so you can use them most effectively. The first hand signal we will teach you is called open, or go, some people call it. All you gotta do is open your hand up like this, give a nice big palm, and show it to your partner, and now they know to hit down the line, and you're going to switch sides off of the return. There's two big ways to give out a hand signal. Either you can do it behind your back, like this, or you can do it behind your paddle, like this. So those are the two big ways, and now we'll show you which hand signals you can use to give to your partner. The first hand signal can go by a couple different names. We've got open, go, and switch. All of them mean the exact same thing. You're telling your partner that you want to switch sides after the return. So to do that, all we gotta do is open up our hand and show a nice big palm to our partner, and now they know to return down the line, and that allows your other partner to buy time and switch sides after the return. Typically, you do this if you have a person who has a strong forehand or is better in the middle and they're stuck on the right side. This gives them a chance to go to the left side and play their strong suit. The next one we'll teach you is the easiest. It's the closed hand signal, or stay. All you gotta do is show a fist to your partner and they know to do basically nothing. They're gonna return down the line or cross court. It's really up to them. And you're gonna stay in your positions. You do this to play safe, or if you already have your strong player on the left side, it makes a lot of sense to just give out one of these. We're about to show you some really advanced techniques, but for most people, this final hand signal is all you need to know. These are the big three, so let's just focus on this, and then I'll teach you some really advanced signals. So the next one is the fake out. This is what you want to do when you pretend you're switching, and then you don't, and go right back to where you started. There's a couple ways people like to show this to their partner. The most common would be a talking hand, so like this, kind of like a flashing hand. The other version I sometimes see is just a finger pointing in a direction. I don't love this one because it kind of gets in the way of the advanced hand signals we're about to teach you, so I would suggest a talking hand is your best option. Now that we've taught you the big three, there's ways to make them even more complex and designate a side you want your partner to return to. Typically, you might want your partner to return to a different side on purpose. If you know there's a weaker player or someone's got a really great forehand, you want to tell your partner, hey, maybe return to the right side instead of the left side here. So to do an advanced hand signal, you're going to start with the shot that you're calling. So if you're telling them that you want them to stay and play the point normally, you start with a closed fist. Then you're going to use your fingers to designate a spot that you want your partner to return to. So if I want to call a stay and have my partner hit to the right side, I'm going to do a closed fist and then show my thumb pointing to this side of the court where I want my partner to be returning the ball. So we start with the closed and then we show our thumb saying go that direction. That's two things you have to communicate. But let's switch it up and give one more example. If I want to switch sides, but I also want them to return to the left side of the court, this is how that would be. I would show my open hand, and then I would use my pinky to designate the left side of the court that I want my partner to return to. So your fingers give away the direction of the return, and your hand signals tell them what type of return you're going for. Lastly, just to clarify, I did exaggerate some of the movements there to make it obvious for you guys what I'm doing. But on the court, the last thing you want to do is give away your hand signals. So no nudging your body like this or accidentally showing your hands to your opponents. Try to be as secretive as possible because we're trying to talk without giving it away.
Another simple but effective pickleball hack is to utilize the shake and bake. This play sets up putaways with ease, plus it's just super fun to do, so let's talk about it. But right before we do, if you found this video helpful so far, please consider subscribing to our channel. The majority of you watching this video are not subscribed, and that's the absolute best way that you can help us out. Thanks. The shake and bake only works when you are the serving team. So after you serve, the opponents will return to you, and now it's you and your partner's time to hit a third shot. And on that third shot, you have several options. One of those options is to drive the ball. So a shake and bake always starts with one player driving the ball. And the goal here is to drive the ball in a very specific location so that your opponents pop the ball up and put it in a location that your partner can easily put that ball away. This is usually a play that you will talk about before the rally starts with your partner. You might say something like, hey, let's shake and bake here. And then as that ball is coming to you, if you have the opportunity, you run the play. So when that ball is coming to you, you want to drive the ball at the person in front of your partner. Now, this is very important because your partner will be running towards the kitchen line. And if you target the person in front of them, the only two places they can hit the ball is pop it up to your partner, which you're looking for, or they can hit a sharp angle away from your partner, which then you can cover really easily. So in this example, let's say that I am driving the ball to initiate the shake and bake, and now my partner is running towards the kitchen line. I want to drive it at the person who's in front of my partner. And the reason this is important, there's actually a couple of reasons. Number one, if this person hits it at my partner, they're probably going to pop it up because remember, I hit this ball with a lot of pace and it's very difficult to control. So if they pop it up, my partner is in a prime position to put that ball away. The second opportunity they have is to hit it away from my partner. And if they try to hit it away from my partner and they don't do this perfectly, then my partner can now poach that shot and put a ball away, effectively winning the point for us immediately. The only option they really have is to hit a perfectly sharp angle cross-court dink. Now remember, I'm driving this ball at them, so controlling this ball and hitting it as a dink is a very hard shot to master. So more often than not, aiming at the person in front of your partner is going to set you up to win the point. Now, even though you've talked about this with your partner before the play started, that doesn't mean you have to go for it. So there's several times where the return you get back hits the ground and then stays super low. And in these examples, I'm not wanting to speed that ball up because to speed that ball up with a drive, I have to hit it super high. And very often that ball just goes over the net. The most effective times to use this are when you get a return from your opponents that bounce somewhere, maybe around the middle of the court, but they don't have a lot of pace and they sit up high. The higher the ball sits up, the easier it is for me to drive, and the closer it is to the net, the less time my opponent has to react. And these combination of variables will usually result in us winning the point. So let's say that you've talked about running the shake and bake, but the return you get is really good. An effective way to communicate with your partner is just to simply say the word stay or back. That indicates to your partner that the return is really good and you don't feel confident driving that ball. So as it's coming to you, just say stay, and then your partner knows to stay back and wait for your drop or your drive, and then maybe move in off the 5th or 7th or 9th shot.
For the next tip, let's teach you the simplest cheat code in the book. Take your paddle tip and point it down when you're about to speed up. That's the whole tip. Let me show you why it's important. Most players like to speed up by reaching out wide and then using a full stroke to strike through the ball like this. Now that seems effective because you have control of the shot, but there's a reason that doesn't work very well. Every time you reach, you're telegraphing exactly where you're about to hit the shot because your paddle face already shows the direction the ball's about to go. Let's say I've got my paddle tip out wide here. Now my opponent knows I'm about to hit across his body. If I move my paddle tip down here, I've just opened up a ton of new options and my opponent has no idea where I'm about to hit the ball because I could go like this, I could go like this, or I could go like this. I can hit all sides of my opponent's body. And that's why putting your paddle tip down is so important. So that's one of the easiest ways your paddle tip can help you when you're on offense, but let's also talk about how it can help you when you're on defense. The top of your paddle should always be tracking the ball during a dink rally. We do this because it helps you prepare for the shot that's probably coming your way, and basically block any speed up and already be ready. When a paddle tip is facing the ball, it's going to position you in already the best spot to block a speed up if it comes your way. So let's say I dink to my right side and my paddle tip is facing that direction. If the opponent were to speed up while I'm facing that direction, then I'm already prepped with my forehand to hit it blocked. So the reason we point our paddle tip at the ball at all moments is because no matter where they speed up at my body, I can get there in a quick motion if my paddle tip is prepped. A lot of players like to protect their backhand over everything else, but the moment someone speeds up to my forehand, I have to make this giant motion to hit a block. Whereas if I was just already tracking with my paddle tip, I wouldn't have to make such a dramatic motion when the ball comes this direction. Generally, you can protect more of your body with your backhand because you can actually move your arm like this. If I tried to do it with my forehand, this is the kind of chicken wing motion I get, so that's not really possible. So biasing your backhand is an advanced strategy in addition to the paddle tip tracing because it's going to allow us to still cover more of our zones and protect our body rather than biasing with a forehand, which we're less likely to protect the majority of our body with. So let me show you what that means. If my paddle tip is tracing towards the left side, instead of just facing the ball dead on with my paddle tip, I'm gonna turn my paddle just a bit. That way I'm more prepared for a backhand as opposed to a forehand, but I've still got a short motion to protect the forehand if needed. So this is kind of the advanced paddle tracing, is going to be slightly biasing the backhand while you're tracking the ball.
Our final but maybe most important hack is about your footwork. If you add split stepping to your movement technique, then your life will get way easier on the pickleball court. The mistake that the majority of people make when they're playing is that they never consider their footwork and their readiness. So I know you've seen this. Someone hits a drop shot and it goes maybe not perfectly over the net, but it goes over the net. They will just run towards the kitchen line and never consider that they should stop and prepare for the shot that's coming towards them. This is where the split step comes into play. Here's a simple habit you need to get into. Anytime your opponent is about to make contact with the ball, stop your momentum, put your feet out wide, and start to lower down. This is called a split step. And what this does is allow you to move in either direction and respond to whatever shot your opponent hits. The worst thing you can do is be running forward and then your opponent hits the ball to your right or your left. And now to get that ball, you'd have to stop your momentum, turn, and try to make an accurate shot. Pretty much impossible to do. But if I had been stopped and they hit the ball to my right, I can easily reach onto my right and defend that shot. In practice, split stepping is pretty easy to implement, but there's a couple things you need to know about how to do it and also when to do it. So first, how to do it. In general, for people below the 5.0 level and maybe people that have some health problems or knee problems or joint problems, I'd recommend doing this. As you're running or moving forward, take a final step to slow your momentum and then split both feet out wide. This is the safest and most effective way to split step. This final step stops your momentum so you don't have to worry about moving forward anymore. And then you can move your other foot over to get both feet established out wide and get ready for the next ball. But when you're watching the pros, you're going to see a different story unfold. Very often at the higher levels, people will jump into their split steps, and this allows them to gain more distance toward the kitchen while also preparing and getting ready. The hard part is controlling your movement as you're going forward. If I jump forward into a split step, I have to have extreme balance and control over my body to be able to stop that momentum and then move in either direction. The final thing to consider in your split step is your timing. Split stepping takes a little bit of time. So if you initiate the split step as your opponent is making contact with the ball, you'll actually be split stepping too late. So instead, you want to try to split step earlier. Right before your opponent makes contact as the ball is approaching their paddle, that's when I begin my split step and I start to lower down. It's way better to split step a little bit too early than it is to split step late and be out of control as I'm moving forward.
And just like that, you know these 7 pickleball hacks to improve your game right now.
And if you want to get even better at pickleball, then YouTube thinks you're going to really like this video. So, split stepping. This is what it's all about.